Still confused about the difference between normal gouache and acrylic gouache? So this is the video for you. Because today I'm talking about the difference between normal gouache or traditional gouache and acrylic gouache. Welcome back to a new video, creative people. My name is Luigi, also known on social media as illustrazionidilut. In this channel I'm talking about art supplies, painting, drawing, my own art journey. So if you're interested in this kind of topics, hit the subscribe button. Today we dive in deep the difference between gouache and acrylic gouache or acrylic gouache, and then doing it based on my own personal experience. I will compare the two different mediums based on different aspects, giving a point to one medium or the other, and in the end of the video I will reveal the final score. Can you already guess the winner? So first of all, let's get familiar with this art supply called gouache or acrylic gouache. On my left side we have gouache, normal traditional one. On my right side we have acrylic gouache. What is gouache first of all? It's considered opaque watercolor because it can be diluted with water and get a very nice blending effect, or it can be used much more thicker and get a very opaque layering, which is not possible with watercolor. Basically, it's easier to be used than watercolor because you can always cover some mistakes you have done, which is not possible with traditional watercolor. After this little difference between gouache and watercolor, let's dive into difference between gouache and acrylic gouache. On the left side, we have gouache. I have these brands, there are many more. This one is Royal Talent. It comes in 10 tubes, kind of pricey because it's extra fine gouache, which means the pigments are very fine ones. Highly pigmented opaque watercolor, also known. Dries quickly, adheres to any not greasy and somewhat porous ground. It can be reactivated, as we will see is the main difference between the two medium. It's kind of about 30-35 bucks or 30-35 euros. Then we have also very inexpensive option for gouache. This one is from Midin. It comes in 24 colors, so many more. And its price is around $20, I guess. You can get, of course, all these colors also in the other set just by mixing the primary ones. Not necessary to have that many, but particularly for the skin color, if you are doing portraits like me, can be helpful to have a already prepared one, such as this one, gouache line from Renaissance Polska. You see we have this titanium white, which is bigger. Why it's bigger? Because normally we don't use white for watercolor, but it's very important in gouache because the colors come out straight from the cube, very pigmented and bright. And if you want to dilute it to have a lower tonal value or simply less bright colors, then you need to add white to it. So always be ready to have a white on your side because it's the most used one. Kind of the opposite of watercolor. Then we go on the right side with acrylic gouache. I bought this one from Liquitex. It's kind of pricey. It's 12 tubes and cost around 50 to 60 euro. As you can see already, the format is different. It's not just tube, it comes in this particular format. They come out in the very beginning. You need to remove the plastic lid in the bottom, and then you can dose it very well, like a single drop of color is very pigmented, and you can use it from these particular tubes. What they say on the back cover is most highly pigmented, with a solid flat matte finish, intense colors, no brush strokes, no cracking, and no need to dilute. This will be all characteristics we are gonna talk in a minute. It has all the conventional gouache characteristics with the permanent stability and durability of an acrylic. Other option that is considered different from Liquitex acrylic gouache is Turner gouache, which I have in these few samples here. So it's a classic tube that comes in many different colors. I have a brochure here World's finest, fast-drying, brilliant matte acrylics. 219 colors. Adhere to almost any type of surface, including rock, metal, paper, canvas. Apply in multiple layers with no bleeding. Full range of pearlescent pastel Japanese colors. So you can see you can use on top of canvas, paper, wood, metal. I personally only use them on paper. It needs some water into it, but can be used also without. Of course, it's super bright and saturated in that case. Let's go now into the different characteristics. Point number 1, blending. Acrylic gouache is a polymer-based paint that is opaque. It's also known as Acrylic Gouache, depending on the brand. Can be diluted. So you can dilute acrylic gouache to make it more transparent, and a medium to change the consistency or increase or decrease the paint ability to spread on your piece of paper. You can go on top with a brush on a gouache painting, and the colors are gonna somehow blend together naturally because of these little molecules of water. This is gonna happen also on acrylic gouache, but only in a limited time span. In, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe less, depending on the humidity of the place you are painting. After this time, this new color you're gonna apply, it's gonna just stack on top with no blending properties anymore because of the acrylic property of this medium. That means that from my point of view, gouache is more versatile from this point. So I will give 1 point for blending properties to gouache, traditional one. Then we go, of course, to the compensation of it, which is point number 2, layering. With gouache may be the most difficult thing to get used to, because you need to use a brush which has almost no water inside. If there is a bit more water than what you thought there should be, then the new layer is gonna reactivate the bottom layer and they're gonna mix together even if you don't want to, ending up in a color which is not the one you want it to be. And this may be very tricky when you're doing portraiting. So on the skin color, it happens to me many times that I reactivate and I create like a area of a different color. And then to solve it, you have basically to wait it to dry completely and go completely on top again. This is the only way you can solve the problem. This problem is not existing in acrylic gouache because of the characteristics of acrylic. You're gonna layer on top when it's dry with so much water you can do, that's not a problem at all. So this layering thing may be much easier in acrylic gouache. Also, you can cover completely if you make mistakes. If you want to change a background, if you want to do whatever, it's possible. So layering is much easier here. I would give a point to this. Going to point number 3, versatility. For what I said already, acrylic gouache is much more versatile because you can layer on top of whatever you want without being afraid of reactivation. It's waterproof. When you go later on top with water, it's not being reactivated like this. This also, after 5 years, you can reactivate with water what you have done. And this can be, of course, a problem if you want to make a painting that is staying forever. Then you need to to add a gouache varnish matte, such as this one. You put on top with a normal brush. It's looking a bit like a soap while you're applying it and give this shiny effect, which may be not what you want to have. Just as comparison, this has not this matte finish, it's not shiny through. Yeah. So basically with this product you get the same final properties of acrylic gouache with normal gouache. But based on this and the fact that you can also dilute acrylic gouache to make it more transparent, add a medium to change its consistency, increase or decrease the paint's ability to spread out, has a matte finish like traditional gouache, but it's still acrylic paint with a soft texture and rich pigmentation. making it easy to blend. So all these characteristics makes this guy more versatile. So I would give a point to acrylic gouache again. Point number 4, waste. If you are using too much pigment from acrylic gouache on your palette, which is not a specific palette for acrylic gouache, which I will talk in a minute, but just normal one, then it's gonna be like plastic. When it's dry, to remove it, you need a spatula and you need to scratch it out, you see. You cannot reactivate just like normal gouache or watercolor. It's pigment completely wasted. This for me is a huge disadvantage, as I'm used to watercolor in the beginning and then to gouache. Going to acrylic gouache was a bit of a shock to have all this waste, because I was used to put more pigment than what I need, because with watercolor it's important to have enough paint. It's a technique that requires also a certain grade of velocity while you are painting, and if you need to make again your color while you are painting, you're gonna lose time, your paper is drying and so on. So I was used to have a bit more than what I need in my palette. With this guy here, you need to dose it very well, otherwise it's gonna be wasted. A huge disadvantage of acrylic gouache, so it's gonna be a nice big point for gouache. There is an option, by the way, to prevent pigment waste from acrylic gouache, and is to use a stay wet palette that will keep your paint moistured and fresh for a long time. It may also lead to problems such as mold, which is not nice, of course. I'm not expert about that, but just to tell you, there is this option as well. Point number 5, reactivation. I already said this can be reactivated easily, this cannot be. You need a special gouache varnish mat for this guy if you want to keep it forever. So this is a point to acrylic gouache. Point number 6, brush. Don't forget to clean your brush immediately after using acrylic gouache for your painting session, or you won't be able to get them back. You can clean the brushes by using a brush cleaner, soap or water, or whatever you want. I normally just use water. In terms of brushes themselves, acrylic tends to be very aggressive to brushes, so you normally would use a very cheap ones. I have my own set for selected brushes, specifically for gouache, which I prefer to use in a flat version instead of the pointy one I use more for watercolor. And the reason behind is that helps me to paint more sculpted way, let's say. I use the same brush for both of them, but normally you would want to have a cheaper brush for acrylic gouache. Because just to tell you that you can use cheap brushes for gouache compared to watercolor. Basically also the synthetic watercolor brushes would make them work. A bit soft one, a bit harder one like this guy, it makes the game. Would have to give a point here because of the reason I said. I would give a point to traditional gouache. Going to point number 7, cracking. Acrylic gouache doesn't crackle on paper when dry because it's water-soluble paint that uses acrylic polymer and its binder. It's less prone to cracking than traditional gouache with thick application, while normal gouache use gamma arabic and or other natural binders, which can crackle when used too thickly. So it never happens to me. I also put them in a small palette. In this case, when they dry completely, the cheaper one tends to crackle compared to the more expensive one. But if I have to be fair, this point goes to acrylic gouache. Point number 8. I think price options. So many options for gouache. Actually, if you want to start with a medium, I would suggest to start with traditional gouache. It may be trickier because of the things I said, that you reactivate the layers, but to learn and see if you like the medium with a very small expense, my very first set of gouache was something like 10 euro. That's an option. Definitely, I would suggest it. I don't have any more here, that gouache. It was quite bad, but it helped me to understand that I would have liked to experiment more with the medium, and then I went directly to this set here. Definitely you have way more options, as I said. Starting from 10 to 20 euro, you can get the big set here, which is definitely a good option. While acrylic gouache is more expensive, even if you have many colors option, tends to be very expensive. Also the Holbein acrylic gouache, which is the top, considered the top one, I never tried, but it's super expensive. So this point goes to traditional gouache for price, range and options. And finally, points number 9, transportability. For what I said, this palette here is one of these two medium. I used this as a palette because I was using on the go. It's a mix of different one. So you see the cracking one here, this brown here, this green here are the cheap one, mid-in. While the pinky one is the Renaissance Polska, and all the others are from the set Royal Talents. You see they are not cracking, they are actually not completely dry because of this palette. You see, they are not completely dry yet, even if I'm not using for weeks. Gouache is somehow transportable, because if you do the same with acrylic gouache, it's gonna get dry in few minutes to hours, and it's gonna be completely waste for the properties I said before. So transportability is a huge point to gouache, traditional one, which says us the winner is finally traditional normal gouache. If I would suggest you to try one medium, I would go for this one. And I would go maybe to acrylic gouache if you want to go more professional in your painting process, illustration. For the properties I said, I tend to like more traditional gouache. Even if you follow me on social media, you see I'm using much more these guys here than this. Even if used recently on portrait, testing this mixed media pad, and the result was quite good in my opinion. So that's up to you. Tell me in the comments which one you prefer, if you tried both, if you tried other brands maybe. I would be pleased to know about it. I leave you now with this video here about the painting process of traditional gouache I've done recently, and I thank you for watching, and I see you in the next video. Bye guys!